So welcome from my side. This session is about security and insights with Azure Monitoring Services. And I had the idea for this session because we as a company, we are doing IT consulting for many enterprise customers. And often most organizations simply don't know what's happening when using Azure services, or how is it with security, how they can improve, let's say, performance or any failures they have in their applications. And this is why I came to the idea to have a session about these topics, because it's not that broadly known how you can improve your services in Azure. My name is Toni Pohl. I'm a Microsoft MVP for Azure Office Development, and I'm located in Vienna in Austria. And I have the pleasure to show you in the next 40 minutes some insights and hopefully some ideas how we can use these services. So let's start here with my introduction about monitoring. Why is it important to know what's going on in your Azure services? Well, we all know that cloud services are very common right now from a cost perspective, from a scaling perspective, and we absolutely can benefit from the services Azure provides about discovering usage and cost and performance, and of course security. So there are a lot of services Microsoft provides in the Azure cloud. And of course, there's often maybe not the full knowledge about which service do I use when. What's the benefit if I use Application Insights or Azure Sentinel or Network Watcher or the Resource Graph or Azure Advisor? And I want to dive into all of these topics and show you how you can use them just from a bird's eye perspective to see, okay, which services can be used for what purpose. So I have this summary slide here showing just the icons and the services that are relevant from my perspective. And I want to start with App Insights because that's the service you should use if you want to monitor a single application. For example, a website, an Azure function or something like this. I also have a very nice demo how you can protocol your own custom events with your own code to Application Insights to see what's going on in there and how is the performance, etc. We also have the App Center, which is also similar, but not included in Azure, but it follows the same goal to get insights how an application is performing. Then we will have a demo about Network Watcher. Network Watcher is to troubleshoot network issues, like, for example, you have a VPN connection and that's not working properly, or you would just want to inspect packages that are delivered to, let's say, a virtual machine or something like this, and you want to really see what's going on in these packages to really debug any issues you might have there. Azure Monitor is let's say a summary which includes single protocol, single logs from Application Insight, storage, and so on, which is more or less a kind of an overview and where you can dive into the details from a higher level. The Security Center does exactly what the name says. It gives you recommendations about how to improve security of your services. We will have a look at each of these services. The Azure Advice is one of my favorites because it really gives you useful recommendations, not only about security, but also about performance and cost optimizations. So this is really useful. And Azure Sentinel is on top of Log Analytics, which gives you recommendations, security incidents you might have, and gives you a tool, a CM tool, to work on any incidents you might have. And then I've added some more useful resources like the Resource Graph to show you which service is currently doing what in Azure. So for example, I have a sample that shows you all the certificates that will expire in the next 30 days, or which websites are using which IP addresses or something. And of course, at the end, there are things that are important like cost management. How can I get alerts if my Azure services reaches a specific budget or something like this? So let's dive into all of these services here. And I have a slide for every service, one summary here with the logo and the name and just the main topics here, like, for example, App Insights and Log Analytics. This allows you to monitor one application. And it's very useful for getting information about failures, about performance. You get an application map. You can also test your application, how the performance is. You can set alerts, etc. So let me show you this here. And let's go to Azure. And when I want to create a new resource here. So let's say I want to create a new Azure function. Let's simply type function here and make this maybe a little bit better readable. So sorry, I just used the light topic here. So let's create a new function here, a function app. And when I say I want to create such a resource here, I give that a name, I select the workspace and give that a test something name and a runtime stack and all of these properties here. But the interesting part I want to point out here is when it comes to the monitoring, by default, Azure suggests that you use or that you enable application insights, and it would create a new application insight storage for you automatically, or you say, I want to protocol into an existing application insight storage. When you do that, I've already done this, for example, for other resources, you can access that. So if I go to an app service that's already existing, and I have one website running here, and it is using a system that's called Umbraco, that's an open source .NET web application CMS system, and this is already connected to application insights, as we see here. So I increase this here a little bit, and here you can see this website here is assigned to this log space, to the application insights resource. In my case, it has the same name here, and here alternative application insights, and I can simply click on view application insights data to see what's happening in that website here. So what can we do here? We see this is the current status for that website, where this is up and running, where I see server requests, server times. I can say I want to see the data from the last 7 days and so on. And here we have the investigate section that shows us, for example, the availability for that website. And here you can see this website is up and running 100% in a specific time frame. So I can I can drag around the time frame here, and I can add tests. I've already added that one here. So for example, I can say I want to test that, in that case, website with a URL ping. This is the URL I would provide. And then I say, okay, I want to test this website from these locations here. And I can select something like, for example, I want to test it from North Europe, from UK West, from West Europe, blah, blah, blah. So things that are very easily to perform from various data centers. I've already done this here, and you can see this website ping here. If I open this here, I selected some locations here, and this is the performance of the website. So this is one thing that gives me an answer, how good is the performance of this specific resource here. So I see, for example, this one here is hosted in North Europe, that this has a very good response time, like 539 milliseconds, while from Central US, for example, we see it's more than 2 seconds. So this gives me a first impression, what can I do to optimize performance? The same here goes for the performance module here, where I can see which pages or which methods have been called from that website here. So I see, for example, the overall time in average is 40 milliseconds. So I can sort here and say, show me all the slow pages. Like, for example, I see here there's a render MVC method. It's an ASP.NET website. And when somebody accesses changelog DE or changelog EN, in that case, it takes 5 seconds almost. So if I want to investigate that, I can simply click on that action here, and then I see the common properties. And I can simply go to one of these results here, to these insights. I see, okay, it was successful. It was from Istanbul in Turkey and so on. And I can go into the details here. And if I click here, let's investigate this a little bit. We will see what takes the longest time here. In that case, this method here was very fast, but there was one request to the database server behind, and the database service, this was the command, and that command was also very fast, 2.3 milliseconds. So I didn't lose time here. So my database server is working properly. That's giving me a response very, very fast. But if I go back, let's see if I see another sample here. Here, for example, we see that this action here opened another website, in that case a blocker, so that was a redirect which was also quick. So with this methods, with these measuring methods, I can investigate slow calls or anything that's that's giving me a bad performance for that website. So that would be, for example, the option to say I want to just see the performance. I also can see the failures, and that's more or less the most important part here. Where are failures happening in my application here? So I can currently see, for example, somebody tried to access a page that's called VP WordPress login PHP. In that case, that's not a WordPress website, it's another system. But I see there are some requests that ended up in 404, which was not found. So this also gives me a little bit of an idea what's happening on that website, or what requests are failing because of 403, because it's not allowed, or 404, it's file not found, etc. You can see that that's a large playground here. Just to give you a quick idea here, for example, if I look for another resource, so I think I have a website that's called At Work AT or so, this one here. And if I look at application insights of that website here, so let's go to the website data, and I go to availability, and I also made a ping test here. You remember this Umbraco website took something like 2 point something seconds from the US or so. So in that case, you see the performance of this website is much, much better because it doesn't have any database behind it. That's a static website, and it's obviously that the request times, the duration for the request is much, much faster than from the CMS system. So if I go back to my Umbraco website again, just to show another benefit here when using application insights. So I simply navigate again to the application insights here. And I go to the availability. And let's have a look. This is the ping. Actually, I wanted to go to the application map. What's happening behind the scenes? So if somebody requests a page, for example, we will see that there are some components included in that website. So we see, for example, this is the website itself, and it's hosted here on an Azure App Service. And for example, we see there's a database icon here. So I can simply click on that here. And in this application map, I see, okay, there's now another component where I see the average response times is 17 milliseconds, 141 calls to that. And then I can start investigating into this connection here and see, okay, what's happening behind the scene. And I can go into the details here and then really see, okay, what's happening, what kind of requests have been running here. And I can simply click on that here to go and see, okay, if this red method is called here, then it goes to the database and says select ID domain from Umbraco domains, and then the next request would be this SQL statement and so on. And I can very easily identify what are slow running tasks here. Good, so with that here, that's just a short impression of what you can do. Another thing that's important here, you can query for specific actions here. So if I go to the logs here, we are connected to an log analytics workspace where we can use our queries and say, I want to see how is the website running, let's say with requests in the past 24 hours, for example, and then even visualize that with KQL, that's the custom query language. So there are predefined queries which you see here, but you can also simply go to the tables here and say, I'm interested in my page views, for example, for the last 24 hours. And then you will see a log, okay, what has been requested and how long was the duration for that and how was the performance and which page has been requested, etc. So that's very, very useful, and we will come back to that later as well. So with that, let's have a look if you want to use it for your own applications. So let's say you want to log into one of these tables here, that would be the custom events or the custom metrics, for example. If your own application throws an error or some user interaction fails or something, and you want to protocol that to get the data here very easily from application insights, and you can also query these things here, for example, requests per country. So I've prepared one statement here, for example, just to give an impression how you can do that, you can, for example, change it to a pie chart here to see, okay, these are the requests that happen to that website here from various countries over a specific time. In that case, it's just the last day, for example. So these are the methods, the tools you can use with application insights to monitor one specific application. I have one sample here. This was the wrong Visual Studio Code. Actually, I wanted to go to Visual Studio here. So for example, I've created an Azure function here, and this Azure function, let me just start this here. What does it do? It's using the custom events to protocol any issues that are happening in that application in an application inside storage. So what I did here is I simply created a new provider here, an iTelemetry provider. I simply continue here so that the function can start. And this is now my function host here. That's my local host 70, 71, and so on. So I simply call that URL here from my browser. So now I'm back in the in my code here. And this is the instrumentation key. That's where I do protocol that data. So let me have a look here. So let's go not to this app service, but I have one running that is called Azure Monitor. This one, Monitor App Insights. And here you can see an instrumentation key, 6DD something. So let's hope that's the right one. Yeah, that's the same key here. So I'm protocolling into that application insights. And what's happening here, so if I simply continue, that I start using this logger here. So now the application starts. That's the standard log that's in the Azure function here. And then I simply create a new dictionary and say, okay, I have some custom data. My application does some action here. And I simply protocol, okay, who called that application here? And I simply track this event here to application insights. So if I do this here, and I can also do it for other types of actions like metrics, for example, or exceptions or dependencies, and I simply log data here into that storage. So more or less I'm done. And if I now go to the logs here and close that suggestion here and say I have some queries prepared, shared queries, demos. So this would be a request that happened here to my application insights. So I can see, okay, this function has been called at a specific time and it took this time here to run, so some milliseconds here. And here are custom dimensions here, for example, what happened in this call here. These are the requests. Then I have, for example, the custom metrics where I also protocoled some data here, dependencies. And let's have a look at exceptions. And we will see that we now have some exceptions here, which I threw here at a specific time, which was today, exception at a specific time. This is exactly what I'm oops, again, the wrong window, sorry for that. So this is my exception that I created here in my code, and I can ask for these exceptions. So the idea when using these custom metrics, this custom data, this custom exceptions, whatever it is to identify any errors. So for example, I can say, give me all the custom metrics for the last 24 hours, and I can create a new alert rule here and say, when more than 2 exceptions happen within 15 minutes, I want to get some information that the application is not running well, for example. And this is one rule I already created. So for example, I said, whenever the average custom log search is greater than, in my case, I said, that's my query custom metrics, that's the custom language. If the numbers result greater than 2 in a specific time frame in 15 minutes and check every 5 minutes, for example, then please send a notification and I can create so-called application action groups here. So I want to get an email, for example, which is not the best way, but just to demonstrate this, I can define the subject and so on, and what kind of severity this error here has. And if I create such an alert rule, I don't save it here. We should see it here in the alerts here. Let's see if this happened in the past, how was the application performing? And I now see the alert was fired multiple times here, and I selected, for example, the severity informational or warning, and we see that this action happened multiple times here, so I can have a look at it and I can take some action about it. So I think this is a very useful thing just to get an idea of what you can do with application insights here. Just to mention the custom query language, which we saw in the log module here, you can use this custom query language, or KQL, for multiple services, like for application insights, what we've seen, also for log analytics, for Windows Defender, for the Azure Security Center, and for Azure Sentinel, for example. And this is the syntax. So you say, this is the table I want to get, and then you define your filters and your render method for that. Okay, let's switch topics a little bit, come to Azure Monitor. This is a service that allows you to give an overview over multiple resources. So let's search for Monitor here, so that you see when you can use that. This is a summary here. So it gives you, for example, alerts. So we should see, for example, the alerts I have created in one specific application insights, and you can configure what shall be collected here, which data should be collected here. And then you see, for example, that grouped by the type of the service. So here is application insights, and mine was called Azure Monitor, for example. If I have Monitor, maybe I have not all subscriptions. You can see I have currently these 30 here. So Monitor App Insights, this was the application insights I used for my custom Azure function, for example, that's hosted here. So I can simply also go into that here, and then I have the same possibilities. So it's really like a shortcut from an overview to a specific service here. So if I go, for example, to virtual machines, I should have one virtual machine that is also connected to a workspace here. In that case, for example, I've created a virtual machine, and the monitor also suggests I should upgrade that Azure Monitor service to get more results, to get simply more signals for that virtual machine, for example. So I should follow that when I have time and go through all of these insights here. So I think this is also a very nice feature, just to get an overview with the Azure Monitor here. The next topic, you can also set alerts, etc. The next topic that is really helpful is the Network Watcher. The Network Watcher simply allows you to troubleshoot, and I've already mentioned that at the beginning here. So for example, you have a virtual machine running, you want to establish a VPN connection to that machine, and it simply doesn't work, and you have no idea where to start here. So this would work as follows. So I could go to my virtual network watcher. So here we go, and you can see I should have already some things here. So let's filter for only to reduce that a little bit here. So let's say I have my virtual machine somewhere here in that subscription here, and I want to, and then I decide simply what do I want to diagnose. In my case, I, for example, want to simply check packages that are sent to a specific machine. And here you can see I've already added one, so there's one packet. So I could go here say that's a new packet capture. I give that a name like test2, for example. I want to protocol into specific storage here. So let's use one of these here. So let's say this one here, and then I can add filters. So which packages shall be protocoled? So I can simply go here and say, well, whatever in that machine specific resource is called, like a web page or something like this, or VPN endpoint or something, I want to protocol that to analyze it later. So for example, I can simply go to that machine. I have it already opened here. That's the virtual machine here. And I say I want to protocol whenever a specific website is called, just to give you a short impression how this looks like. So let's do an lookup, go to one domain. In my case, I use my company domain. So that would be the IP address that's hosted in Azure. So I say the remote IP address is this, the port, we say that's a HTTPS page. And I simply want to start the monitoring for that here. So now this package monitor will be created, and we will see that in some seconds here. And let's see if it's already here. So let's refresh. Here it is. So it's currently loading. So it should be up and running. So when I now go to this machine here and I visit, let's say, this website here, that package should be caught here in the background. So let's minimize that and say I want to stop the monitoring here, and then you get such a package here. So, and this package is stored in that storage, which I selected here. And now I can download it from that storage here. So here it is. So let's have a look at my Explorer. So here we go. So it should be the latest package here, this one with the current time here. And then I can use tools like, for example, Wireshark or other tools to analyze that CAP package here. Let's do this. Open it. Here we go. Open that package here in my downloads. And now I can go through this package here and analyze what's going on. So for example, I see the resource somewhere, so it should be here. So that was the URL that was caught. And in that case, for example, I see here that's the certificate service that's used for that service, because I said I only want to catch packages with using a port 443 for HTTPS and so on. So also useful for debugging specific scenarios where we have any issues with network connections here. My tip for analyzing these CAP files, if you have Joko installed, you can simply install, for example, Wireshark or any tools with Joko as well. Okay, we've seen that. Let's come to the Azure Security Center. When would you use that service? Well, the idea is here just to collect and prevent any security issues. So let's have a look at that. So let's go to Security Center here. And here we see we have a secure score. So administrators who already know the secure score in Microsoft 365, it's very similar with the Security Center here in Azure. It gives you a score and it gives you recommendations. So the recommendations here simply say what should you do here in your environment. And you can see in my environment, for example, I have a bunch of subscriptions here. For example, MFA. All the accounts are having MFA, that's good. But where I'm not so good, for example, let's have at remediate vulnerabilities here. Let's see what's happening here. For example, I have a virtual machine here. That's my current one. And this here is unhealthy. And in the best case, it says, well, I should install extensions to enable vulnerability assessment solutions on my virtual machine. And in the best case, I can simply select that and say fix. Other recommendations would simply guide me to a website showing me what actions I should do to get rid of this security issue which could arise here. So in that case, it's really simple. I could simply say fix it and then go through the steps here and simply remove that security issue. So that's also my recommendation, to go to the Security Center, to the recommendations there, and really look at the red warnings here to see what kind of security measurements you should take here. And you can select the recommendations here in the coverage to say, okay, which application or which subscriptions do I want to cover with these recommendations here. Okay, that's a very quick one, but just to go a little bit further here now with the Azure Advisor. The advisor is also giving you recommendations for security, but also for other topics like underutilized resources or cost or performance or what you should upgrade. So for example, you could get a recommendation from the Azure Advisor that says, well, there's an old storage account and that is still used in the classic mode. You should upgrade that storage account to be more secure, to get better performance and so on. And the idea here, or the thing that I really like about the advisor, is it's a free personalized recommendation service. So it doesn't cost anything, it comes automatically. And when you open the advisor, you see you see all the recommendations here in various groups here about costs, about security, reliability, and so on. And let's have a look at the advisor here in my environment. So here's the advisor. It also gives me a score and it gives me the various topics here. Like, again, there are security issues, but there are also some things Maybe let's take a little bit more here, just to see a little bit more recommendations here. And for example, I don't have any cost recommendations. I have some security, but I also have some reliability things. Or for example, this Azure Advisor tells me I should enable soft delete to protect your blob data for specific storage accounts. So in my case, for example, I have these 3 storage accounts in various subscriptions, and it says, well, this one here, I should enable soft delete to protect my blob data. So that's one recommendation. I can follow that or not. So I could also say postpone or dismiss it if I'm not interested in fulfilling this step. But in my case, I say, oh yeah, that's a good idea to enable soft delete. I could go here and say, yeah, this is the switch here, and I want to keep my data for 7 days, and then simply save that. So in many cases, Azure the Advisor makes it very easy for me to follow the recommendations by fixing it with some clicks, or by reading an article to see, okay, I should enable this or that feature here. So what else do we have in the Advisor? Of course, you can also create alerts here to say, okay, if something's happening here, I want to get an information about this or that service is not secure or not reliable, or the performance could be better. So if you look at performance, let's see what's happening here. Well, there's one recommendation: configure DNS time to leave to 60 seconds in a traffic manager profile, for example, and so on. Or I don't have snapshots for storage account, etc. So also the idea here is to simply read these Advisor performance and recommendations and simply follow that here. We also have, I have just some screenshots here. We have some classifications, which are things that are highly recommended, like, for example, I should enable Azure Defender in 3 subscriptions, or you can see there's a secure transfer to storage account should be enabled, quick fix, where I can simply say fix it, and then I have solved that problem here. And there's some other recommendations like that are only medium or low, which I can follow them. It's not really that important, but it really depends on the specific action here. What I also like about the Azure Advisor is that it gives me optimizations, recommendations. It reminds me with emails and say, hey, administrator, something's happened in that tenant. I have some recommendations for you. Please have a look for that. For example, a typical recommendation for a virtual machine to make it more secure, to make it more reliable, are things like here: ensure the audit group membership, you should enable Windows Firewall, and so on. So simply follow these recommendations here with that. Let's come to Azure Sentinel, because Azure Sentinel is on top of all of the other services. It allows you to collect data, it allows you to create rules, and it allows you to do some hunting for any threats that are happening to your tenant and to investigate them and to respond to them. So let's open the Azure Sentinel. So here it is. So I have one workspace here with the same name and the Azure Sentinel service itself. And it gives me a dashboard here with events and alerts over time. In that case, you can see there are a lot of events in here. And the benefit of Azure Sentinel is that I can collect a lot of data into my workspace that is then analyzed with Azure Sentinel. So the first step here would be to go to the data connectors and say, which data can I send to my Azure Sentinel workspace? So for example, if I have a firewall that's creating a syslog or a syslog server, you can see there's one data connector that's called syslog, and there's a short description here, and I can open the connector page here, and that page here says me what kind of data do I need here. I need write permissions to a workspace, for example. Then I need to install the agent on that syslog server, depending if it's a Azure or non-Azure Linux machine, and so on. And then I simply follow these steps here. Once I've installed that connector, connector provides the data to the Azure Log Analytics. You can see here there's something like 114 connectors. There's something like 15 more than the last time I checked. So you can see which connectors are active here in my environment. So it depends on the connector, if that connector does cost something, and if I have the prerequisites to use that connector. So in my case, for example, I have a connector to Azure Active Directory, to identity protection, and so on. You can see it here with the green mark here, like for example, Azure Key Vault. And if I open that connector page here, it should say me, okay, I am connected to a specific Key Vault to give me information about how that is used here in this workspace here. So the data connectors are the first thing which I would simply connect to my Sentinel here. And then we have the analytics here. So here I have active rules, which are currently running in my environment, and I have rule templates. So for example, we had the case that in the past we had the Hafnium issue with Exchange servers, and there are rules for that to detect, is this Exchange server affected by Hafnium, for example. And you also see the severity, the classification for that. So there's a rule here that says also kQuery language. Okay, if one of these pages, one of these types here is found in the security event log, and the process has, for example, this or that name, then do something, then give me an alert and say that's severity high, for example. And I can simply follow that rule template and say, I want to create a rule based on that and modify that rule so that it fits for my environment here. And you can see what with the green icon here, I would have data for that here if device file events, if I'm logging this data into the log analytics workspace. So I can create my own rules here. So for example, we have created some here, we call them at work here. So we said, for example, if in the audit logs, there is an operation where a user was added to a specific security group, I want to get that information because that group is just for administrators and we have a process for that. And we say that must have happened in the last 5 hours, and this runs every 5 hours, so that I have a full audit of all the operations where a user has been added to a specific group. In my case, the group, that's the GUID of the group, for example, and that the user principal name is a specific one, just to give you an idea how you can create your own rules with the KQL language here. And then, of course, we will see if that rule here is happening, what trigger shall be fired. So, for example, if that returns more than one, so one user has been added, I want to get an information, I want to get an alert, and that alert here will also show up here in the overview. For example, we will have, I guess I saw some alerts here. Here, for example, 7 alerts here. So I can simply look at that here. Also, again, this is KQL showing me now the alerts that happen in my Azure Sentinel. So this is also a very nice feature here, which allows you to be more secure in your environment. Just to mention one more thing here. How long is the data stored in Azure Sentinel? You can configure that, and also this depends on the size of the data that's sent to that Azure Sentinel workspace here. So if I go to the settings, you can see these are the prices for using Azure Sentinel. It also has machine learning to see, okay, this rule has been fired multiple times. Is it important, not important? So there are a lot of things you can configure here, but to come to my point here is the workspace settings collect the data here. And in here, I think we have it somewhere in the workbooks. So I have to have a look here, usage and estimated costs here. And here's a link that's called data retention. And that data retention link here can configure how long the data will be stored. By default, it's 30 days. And if I go to the maximum right here, you see that I can configure up to 730 days of storage. And depending on the storage, of course, the price of this service will be. So you can decide on in your tenant, how long do you want to have the data available for querying them with KQL and creating your rules, etc. Okay, so Sentinel is a really big topic, and it allows you also, if I go back here, to create your own workbooks, which is more or less a report to say, okay, how many workbooks do I have here, what happened here. So for example, if I go to the audit logs here and I say view saved workbook, and I see, okay, here are actions, and I search for my name, for example, I should see all the actions in that case from the Azure AD audit logs. There, for example, that user account has been updated, or where this user has requested privileged identity management 25 times in that time frame in the last 90 days. I use PIM, for example, or where I did give a consent to an application and so on. So this is really helpful to get an impression of what's happening in your tenant and to improve the security. So Sentinel, have a look at Sentinel. It's definitely worth it to analyze your tenant. Okay, I'm running out of time. Just want to give you a very short info about the App Center. This is also very similar to App Insights that's running outside of Azure, but you can use it for similar purposes, so you can monitor your application. It's great for all types of applications, not only for web applications, also for mobile applications here. This is the formerly Xamarin Test Cloud, so you can test your applications on multiple devices with the App Center as well. And you can also distribute your applications with the App Center, just to point this out here very quickly. The resource graph is also useful to get information about the current system. So if I go here, for example, on my dashboard, I have a box here that shows me which certificates are expiring in the next days here, for example, or in the next 30 days. Again, this is KQL, as you see, and we say every certificate that's used in my Azure subscription that is expiring within 30 days, please show me a list so that I can take action. Okay, these things will expire soon here. Okay, so just to go to my resource queries. So here we go. I have prepared similar queries here. For example, if you have the problem, you see in a firewall log that a specific IP address is used and they have no idea, okay, which service is using that IP address. For example, you could create a query like here where you say, okay, I want to filter by website and which websites are using this IP address here, for example, and this would be the answer for that, to say, oh, okay, there's an app service where multiple websites are running here, and these are using this IP address, for example. So these are typical queries or questions you have, and you can answer them here with the resource graph very quickly. And the last thing I want to point out is, of course, cost management. Cost management is important for every organization using Azure services. You can also create alerts for that. Just to give you a quick demo here, cost management and billing. And let's go to my billing scope. I'm that user here. And I think I can do it here for this subscription, or I think it was another one, sorry. I think it was that one here. And let's go to the cost alerts. Let's see if I'm able to do this. You have to be owner for that here. So of course it was the other subscription. Obviously it was that one here, cost alerts. So I can go here and create a new cost alert for my subscription where I say whenever something happened that the budget is over, let's say $100, for example, I want to get an alert for that. I think I've already created it somewhere in one of these subscriptions, but you get the idea. When you can create a budget here, and when that budget is exceeded, or when you say, if I reach 80% of that budget, then I get a notification to have a look what kind of services here produce that higher costs here. Okay, so let's come back to my end here. Of course, there are more things you can use in the Azure portal. You can combine them, you can create your own applications. There are APIs, there's PowerShell. We also have solutions for getting more out of Azure to see the usage, what kind of users are guests, how many resources have been used in a specific resource group, which service costs more than other services, and so on. So there's a lot to find out with other tools. And this is maybe the summary of my recommendation when to use what service. And I've led through every of these services here. And this is, from my perspective, really the output of this session here. If you want to monitor an application, do it with App Insights or do it with the App Center. We have seen the Network Watcher, that's for inspecting network traffic. If you want to check out multiple services, use the Azure Monitor and the Azure Advisor. Security Azure issues are, of course, best visualized in the Security Center, but also we have the Azure Sentinel service that also shows us security issues, but also I can investigate that there and have a little bit more functionality there. Also, to get current resource data, what we've seen at the end, we can use the resource graph for the current status. Everything else, what we've seen, simply analyzes the logs where we feed data to, and cost management also is important. So I think this is really the takeaway from this session here, to understand which service can be used for what purpose. At the end, I want to point out, if you want to see the samples or some more information, links, or this presentation, you can get it from my GitHub repository. I've also added a barcode here on the right side. There's a repository that's called Azure Monitor, and you can find all the data, the links, and the presentation in there. And with that, many thanks for your time. Please don't forget to rate the session, the calls to action. And I hope you enjoyed the session. It was useful for you, and I wish you a very great rest of the conference. Thank you.